Hang on. We're live. Hang on. Howdy do, neighbor. It's Berean Spirits time once again. The boys have gathered around and they're ready for you. So join in, make comments, and study with the guys as they try to study as the Bereans did in Acts chapter 17. And now, here's the guys.
Good morning and welcome back to Berean Spirits. I say good morning. If you're watching in another part of the world, it might not be morning, so hello to you. Welcome back to the Berean Spirits. My name is Josh Thornhill. I'm currently working with the Brookmead Church of Christ in Johnson City, Tennessee. We have our normal co-host with us today, Richard Dodson from Kearney Church of Christ in Kearney, Missouri. How you doing, Richard?
Good, very good. Trying to hit the right buttons. I do apologize for the opening of the show there. I hit the logo button instead of the opening button, but we're started.
We'll excuse you because we know you've been sick.
Yeah.
And down below me, who's currently muted right now, is my dad, Thomas Thornhill, working with the Rose Avenue congregation in Bellflower, California. How you doing?
I'm okay. I'm here this morning.
Okay, good. I think we all are. I think that's a plus. All right, so today we are going to be talking about Christmas. Not so much the idea of the fact that it is Christmas and really what that is going to involve as far as the religious context of that what do you call it, of that holiday. I think we've kind of made ourselves clear on that probably, but really what we're going to deal with is how we reflect Jesus in what we do in Christmas, dealing with some of the various challenges that the Christmas season is going to bring to Christmas or to Christians. We're going to be discussing how we can navigate those in a way that will help us to glorify God and help us to maintain our faithfulness to the Lord in all that we do. I think the first thing that we're going to be dealing with this morning is really as we travel, because holiday seasons are filled with travel. People travel. I'll be traveling. I know that. And a lot of times people think that when they travel, that they kind of can take a vacation even from the Lord. And so one of the things that's important for us as Christians is remembering that we take Jesus with us as we travel. So either of you want to jump in on that one?
Well, I got some ideas. I used to work at the airport to supplement, to be able to preach. Sometimes I'd have to take on jobs to be able to continue preaching. And one job I had was working at the airport. And that meant sometimes that, working around Thanksgiving or Christmas. And there's a lot of stress when people have to travel in the airport and in other places, driving down the road, things of that nature. But I see an awful lot of stress. I drove a bus from the parking lot and economy parking to the airport. And so, I was constantly around the people who were traveling and, they're trying to get their kids going. Everything is just fast and busy. People getting off work, kids getting out of school. They're trying to get going. And, the airports are swamped. And so there's a lot of temptations to your patience. And I think that's something that Christians need to realize is that your patience is going to be tried when you're traveling. And so you need to be prepared for that. Not everything is going to go your way. Now, are you going to forget Christ when all of a sudden, uh, your patience starts getting pushed? If the airlines bump you, if you get involved in some road rage, are you going to forget about the fact that you're a Christian and your goal is to try to save these people who are, you know, testing your patience? Um, we can't allow that to take place. We got to make sure that we're taking Jesus with us and that this is an opportunity for people to see Christ in our lives. And so you need to expect it. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be a trial. Prepare yourself for that before you even embark on it.
Sure. And I think we've discussed some of these concepts as we have dealt with summer vacation and things like that. But, you think about children, they grow up under their parents' roofs and then they finally go off to college and they kind of view that as an opportunity to put off some of the shackles that they experienced in their parents' homes. Um, if we're not careful, we can get in that mindset and thinking that we're away from home, we're in a different place, we're around different people, we're not in our normal routine. And so we can do things that we normally wouldn't do. But the point is, and I think that the point that Richard's trying to make is we need to take Jesus with us. He's to govern our lives in all points, not just on uh, when we're at home. He's to be the guiding influence and the one that we're living for, whether we're at home or whether we're visiting somewhere else.
Right. Yeah. Going along with that, you've mentioned summer travel and so on. Obviously, for many people, the traveling that they're going to be doing is it's vacation. It's vacation time for them. And the sad reality is we know that there are many that when they take a vacation, they take a vacation from the Lord, as well. And, when you talk about your influence, if you're dealing with a family that is not Christians, say you have those even in the denominational world, or go with those that don't believe anything at all, as far as that. Because Christmas this year is on a Sunday, you need to make sure that where you are at, the best thing you can do to set an example is make sure that you set aside time to go attend the local congregation, especially if you are away from home. That more than anything else is going to set the best example about what is going on, or how dedicated you are to Christ. Your family needs to see that, and they may mock you or whatever. But just remember Jesus in Matthew 10. Matthew 10. He talked about how he did not come to bring peace but a sword in verse number 34. And in verse 37, he said, "He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. He who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He who does not take up his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me." So you got the point there. If you need to love the Lord more, even more than your family. Now, having said that, as I said, I think the very best thing you can do is attend services on Sunday and make that a priority. Now, here's some suggestions if you're visiting with a family with denominational concepts or with a non-believing family. You know what? Let them know ahead of time what you're going to do. And the other one is be respectful as you let them know, this is important to me, and I'm going to go worship God today like I do every single Sunday, and do it in a respectful way. And if for some reason they mock you, and I think we're going to get to this in another point, but if they mock you, so be it. By the way, don't return in kind. So I just think that's the best influence you can be is to attend on Sunday. And I think we were discussing in the pre-show, the sad reality is that there are going to be churches out there, denominations, and I'm concerned more when it happens when churches of Christ, but they're going to cancel or reduce services because it is Christmas, and that's I mean, we're supposed to be. You're supposed to be observing the birth of Christ, I mean, as they've created it. And of course, like you said, we understand what the Bible says about that. There is nothing in the Bible about that. But but supposedly you're observing the birth of Christ, and the way it is you're going to take a day of worship away from him. And that applies individually and congregationally.
What I find sad, though, is throughout the other days of the week, when Christmas falls on any other day of the week, there's usually special Christmas services.
Yeah, that's
and yet when it falls on the first day of the week, we're gonna limit our normal worship because it's a holiday.
It's a day for family.
Yeah, and I know there might be some that want to say that, well, maybe we'll just meet for worship. We won't have our normal Bible class, or we'll maybe only meet in the morning. We won't have our evening service. I might be a little blunt here, but do we love the Lord with all of our hearts? Because if we do, that's never going to even enter our minds.
Right. Yeah.
That kind of thinking is never, ever going to enter our minds. If God is the center of our hearts, like he ought to be, we're not going to even think twice about going to worship him on the first day of the week, like we always do. Like a holiday's not going to change that. And if you're on a what's it called, on a vacation or a trip of some kind, and then you're going to try and find an opportunity to be able to gather with the Lord's people on that day. And so I think, we need to remember that we belong to God all of the days of the year, and especially on holidays.
Well, I don't even think that shouldn't even be questioned. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it is something if we're going to stay with family, I agree with Thomas. That is something we need to let everybody know ahead of time that, we're going to be headed to church.
Yeah.
And so, people can plan. I know some families, may think you're going to take the day off, and maybe they're going to have their Christmas celebration. They're planning it that morning. I think it's only polite to be able to share that with them and say, listen, we do go to church and we're planning on going. So I think that's a good idea, is that you make sure that the families that you're staying with, whether it's family or friends, let them know that you're going to be going to church. And on another point, and this always comes up, a lot of times people take vacations at Christmas time. Make sure you know ahead of time where you're going to go. If you're traveling to an area that you've never been before, you can get with your preacher to find some churches that you can attend. And so that you need to prepare for going to church. That's just not something that you're going to compromise on. And so that should be a priority. Yeah, you should be that should be your number one priority. If you're going to go to an area you've never been, you should be thinking about, okay, where are we going to church? And find a place that you can worship. And then you can, decide the rest of your decisions around that. Um, I went one time to, I think it was Utah years ago, and we ended up having to drive 3 hours to get to church because there just wasn't any churches out there. We drove 3 hours. Can you imagine that? 3 hours on a Sunday morning to get to church, and then 3 hours to get back to where we were staying. That wasn't very smart. Make sure that you want to stay close to where you're going to go to church. Just makes it more convenient.
Sure. Um, uh, so yeah, basically we need to, people want to say they keep Christ in Christmas. Um, I don't know necessarily that that's really a big priority, but I would settle for keeping Christ in Christians and making sure that he's governing us in all that we do.
Well, I think a point to be made is that the Ethiopian eunuch was traveling when Philip joined himself to them in Acts chapter 8.
Hmm.
And, he was trying to understand God's word. He was studying from the book of Isaiah. And God used that as an opportunity to help him in his spiritual life. So, keep that in mind as you're traveling. If you continue to seek God, even during your travels at Christmas, if God is going to help Philip or the Ethiopian eunuch, then why wouldn't he assist you? I mean, that might be an occasion, that the Lord can use to be able to bring further enlightenment to your soul. So, that's something to keep in mind. If you're sitting in an airport, instead of burying your nose in a phone, or you can open the Bible or open a Bible app and read it. Continue to think about the Lord. If you have, if you're not busy trying to get on a plane or something, um, you can just sit back, close your eyes, and pray. But make sure you take Jesus with you and continue to seek Him. And as we see with the Ethiopian eunuch, the good things happen. It's not a bad thing to take Jesus with you on your travels. Trust me, nothing bad is going to happen taking Jesus with you on your travels. It's just
Right.
good stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another thing I think that you're wanting to cover here in this discussion is some of the challenges that we're going to face as Christians, and that this season is going to bring. One of the challenges that some Christians are going to face is their work is going to have Christmas parties, and oftentimes those parties are filled with drinking. There's alcohol being served and people partaking of that. And a lot of times Christians are left with questions: do I go? Or if I do go, how do I, navigate such an instance? And so, what kind of advice would you give to those Christians who might be in circumstances where they have those office parties that are dealing with, they're going to deal with that kind of immorality while they're there?
Well, I think I have experience at this. Um,
You
when I
host
was
those parties?
when I was a young man growing up, my father was a builder, and in my early 20s, I got involved in real estate, and with I was learning the business is what I was doing, learning the sales end of it. But they had a Christmas party, and now, of course, now I was raised by Christian parents, and the church we attended, we'd have get-togethers, and that's kind of what I knew. I didn't think about any other type of get-together, and so when they were talking about a Christmas party, and we were expected to be there, I'm like, hey, I like the people I work with. This will be fun. I was thinking about we're going to play games and things of this nature. And so what I'm going to tell you now is a true story. Uh, the party gets started, and I'm just very naive, very naive. And I went over and got some punch, and I thought this is the best punch I've ever had. And I finished it pretty quick because it was so sweet. And so then I went and got another glass of punch, and I thought, well, this is fantastic stuff. And so I was over there talking to individuals, and I looked over, and the office manager was having to make more punch, and he's pouring 2 bottles of Jack Daniels into the punch. So I hurriedly went over to him and I said, hey, did you make the first batch of punch? And he's like, yeah. I said, did you pour Jack Daniels into the punch? And he's like, yes. Now, that was the first time that, except for cough medicine, that a little concoction my dad made when I was a child, that was the first time alcohol I had ever consumed it. And of course, I got scared. I was thinking, oh my lands, I've had 2 drinks of this. I'm going to get arrested driving home. So I hurriedly went out and got my. Luckily, I didn't live far, but I wanted to get home, thinking maybe I could ward off the effects of alcohol. I just didn't. I was very naive. But needless to say, these kind of things happen at office Christmas parties because the people who are running these parties are not Christians. All right. And these are the things that they expect. And so, I went to another party the next year and I wasn't going to be there long, but there was other people who claimed to believe in God. So I thought they were going to be more respectful to our beliefs. And it appeared like it was going to be until somebody brought in a male stripper. And of course, that caused me to leave. These types of things are going to take place at these kind of parties because that's what people believe in. There's going to be people who are doing drugs. There's going to be people getting drunk. There's going to be worldly things taking place at office Christmas parties. Now, that may not be true for all parties. I agree. You may work for some people who don't want to have a party like that, but they're very few and far between. So you need to make sure before you partake in these parties, find out find out what kind of party it is. And if your boss requires you to show up, listen, get there, stay for an hour, talk to everybody, make sure everybody sees you, and then get out of there. But understand these are the kind of things that take place at office Christmas parties, and it's not a good environment in most cases for Christians to be in.
Right. Yeah. I understand. Because of my job and because the way I've been raised, my dad's job, always been in a family of preachers.
Hey, my dad.
We never had to deal with the office parties, except for when we got together as brethren. The secular stuff. And, we do that every year, but obviously we don't have any of those concerns. There's no dancing, obviously zero alcohol, no questionable entertainment or anything like that. And my thoughts, and it's easy for somebody that's on the outside, it's easy for a preacher. You don't have to deal with this with your job and stuff, but it's easy to tell people don't go. And my first advice would be, and I know you agree with this, Richard, based on what you said, if you know what's going on and it's not compulsory, don't go.
Yeah.
I mean, if they mock you, so be it. If you have to go, just remember that Jesus has always emphasized that we are in the world, even though we're not of the world. There is an understanding that we need to understand as Christians that it was not God's intent that we live in monasteries. I mean, how can you carry out the Great Commission? How can you try to teach others? How can you let your light shine if you're putting it under a basket? And by the way, that's what a monastery would be. Or isolating yourself and never associating with the world. But you have an opportunity in this situation, just like with your family and your travels, you have an opportunity to let your light shine simply by what you do and what you don't do, how you talk and how you don't talk. And I totally agree with you. It's one thing when there is a little bit of alcohol there, and you just don't participate. And somehow somehow make it known that you're not participating. I would have a Coke can or a bottled water. I wouldn't pour my non-alcoholic drink in the same cup that they're drinking the alcoholic punch from. Make this is an example. I wouldn't go out there on the dance floor, wouldn't be doing that. And obviously, if the entertainment degraded like what you are talking about, or like what you talk about happened there, obviously it's time to leave. And that's straightforward. But I guess I can't speak from. I know I can't speak from experience. But with my Pollyanna view, I just hope that all office parties aren't like that. In other words, even though there's an office party and some things might be going on, they don't expect everybody to get caught up in the ungodly parts of what the world does.
Well, they're not all like that.
Yeah, exactly.
My wife works at a school, and they have a very good get together. So I mean, they're not all like that, but there are a lot.
Oh, and I can imagine, right? And the whole point is, this is an opportunity for you to let your light shine.
Well,
I got a little way.
The places where I was, I don't think that you're going to find receptive people at that point. But I understand what you're trying to say. I mean, we need to always be trying to find people who are, receptive to the gospel. It's just at some of these parties,
yep,
they're not seeking Christ. They're seeking gratification of the flesh.
Yeah, exactly.
And at that point, you're just casting the pearls before the swine.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and by the way, you got to make the judgment. If you're working at a job for any length of time, the first year that you go, you know how it says, you know how the saying goes: "Fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me." That applies to those parties as well. It's one thing to go the first time. And then when you find out what it is, whether you can go back and still maintain your light.
Yeah.
I just want to make one point about, the church, the brethren there getting together. You mentioned you don't have to worry about the unsavory entertainment, but I mean, I've seen some of those Christmas suits that you've worn. So,
Well, that's a whole nother story. So,
I mean, they have those suits.
You heard of ugly Christmas sweaters?
Yeah, I mean, it's like he had one of those suits that was like the red Christmas, like wrapping paper type, and I think it even had lights in it.
Yeah, exactly. A flashy tie and all that kind of stuff. So
it's not a bad idea before the party takes place is to find those who are responsible for conducting the party, and then asking them, are we serving alcohol?
Yeah.
And how is it going to be distributed?
Yeah.
What's actually taking place here? And just let them be known up front. Just say, listen, I'm a Christian, and I'm going to try to keep being a Christian even during an office Christmas party. Is this party going to be conducive, to my beliefs? And a lot of times you might be surprised. There's going to be people that will tell you up front, no, it won't be. And if it won't be, if they tell you no, then you can go to your boss and say, listen, this is what I've been told. I'd rather not take part. And, just be honest. And again, if your boss doesn't like that response, then maybe you need to find another place to work.
At some point, you certainly need to be looking.
Yeah.
I mean, if you got that attitude, so.
And there are places that are. I've talked with Christians that were expected to drink, and they were told, if you don't drink, you can't work here. That's not a good thing, but that does take place in some situations. So, Um, yeah, it's these office parties can really be difficult for a Christian.
Sure. Sure. And I would say that there's probably challenges, not just as far as the office Christmas parties are concerned, but even times with our own families, we can have challenges um, as far as the things are concerned. Just the discussions that we have with our families, especially if our families are not Christians. Um, and so, whether we're talking about politics or sports or something, it becomes easy to get into some heated discussions there, right? Um, I remember at Thanksgiving, I was giving my aunt a hard time about the team that she was rooting for, and yeah. Anyway,
Can we answer a question before
yeah,
we proceed?
yes,
David Stambursky, and I'll go ahead and show this. He made a comment. He says, I know you probably won't agree with this, but don't you think too much is made about this holiday called Christmas? Yeah. I mean, it's only one day a year, so in the whole realm of things, it's not that big a deal. If people are traveling and seeing family, and you know you're going to have a small church service in your hotel room, correct? No, that I don't agree with. I don't see anywhere in the Bible where people could just become their own church out of convenience. All the places that where I seen churches, David, in the Bible were areas where people have come together to worship the Lord and to form um and to run the church as the Lord sees fit as his organization. In other words, they were striving to have elders, they're striving to have deacons, these types of things that are taking place. They're working at taking the gospel out in that community. And uh, now, by that argument, I have seen Christians who had that idea that they could just worship anywhere, and I don't see that in the Bible. I just don't. Maybe you guys can help me with that, but I don't see an example of that. Uh, I see where Christians lingered so that they can worship with the saints, but I don't see a situation where someone just said, "Well, I'm going to go to the NASCAR races this weekend, and so I'm going to worship in the back of my camper," which I've actually known Christians to do. They missed church service so they wouldn't miss the start of a race. They had a small worship service in the camper of their truck. Uh, and so that's what I would say, David. I mean, I would say on that point you just made, I would ask somebody to prove it. I'm not against it, but I'm saying show me where someone has the authority to create a one-day church in their hotel room or in the back of their camper or wherever.
I would add to that. Um, our life in Christ is about sacrifice. Jesus sacrificed his life to redeem us from sin, and he calls us to sacrifice our life to him. And sometimes that means I'm gonna sacrifice some family time on Christmas because it's on a Sunday, and I'm gonna go gather with the Lord's people. Sometimes that means I'm not going to have all the time to do everything that I want to do because my life is devoted to Christ. And I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ lives in me, Paul said in Galatians 2 and verse 20. That needs to describe our lives. And what bothers me is how so often we are unwilling to make small sacrifices just so we can gather with the Lord's people, as if it's such a great chore to go worship God who died for us to redeem us from sin. And I just want to emphasize the impact of that. Um, because as I said earlier, if we love the Lord with all our heart, it's not going to be a question. That's going to be what we're going to do. We want to honor him. We want to serve him. We want him to be the focus of our life. And we're going to take time away from spending time with family on a holiday if that means we can go worship the Lord with his people. I mean, it just, our lives are supposed to be devoted entirely to the Lord. And I think at times we kind of want to hold on to the world with one hand and God with the other and expect to have both, the best of both worlds. And it doesn't work that way. We're presenting ourselves as a living and holy sacrifice, Romans 12 and verse 1. And so we need to devote ourselves to him. And I don't think we're making too much of just one day when we say that we need to make sure that we are gathering with the Lord's people to worship. I mean, Jesus, we might say, did Jesus make too much of me when he died for me? And so, anyway, did we sufficiently cover the whole family discussions side there, or did you have more thoughts that you want to add as far as the
David goes on to say, during the recent pandemic, I know a lot of people that stayed home and they associated through Zoom if they felt threatened by a gathering or with a group of others. And I understand that, David. I know that took place. I just don't see, again, I'll go back to what I said. I go back to 1 Corinthians 11, where it talks about the Lord's Supper, and it talks about taking the Lord's Supper when the church gathers together. And then I notice on our singing how we're supposed to sing with one another, to edify one another. And I just don't see how those things can be accomplished through Zoom, or just the church being apart. That's my feelings on it. And so if I can find biblical authority to do those things, I wouldn't be against it. I just don't see the authority for that. Those are my thoughts. And so that's I'm just being honest with you, David. That's where I stand on that. But now,
Yeah.
getting back to go
Yeah,
ahead.
Richard, you also know, when you talk about that with the pandemic, though, there's a whole difference. There's a big difference between a pandemic, which is unplanned, and something that you have control over, which is, where you're going to be for Christmas, you have control over that. So there's a little difference there.
And I would say in the pandemic, is Zoom worship the ideal? Absolutely not. But in a lot of cases, due to the restrictions that a lot of our governments placed upon us, brethren were trying to do the very best that they could in the current situation that they were in. I don't like the Zoom worship. I don't think it fulfills the responsibility to worship together in spirit and truth. I think it's, and some are using it to substitute true worship with the people of God, so that they can just sit on their couch and watch it, and it's less of an issue to them. And I'm not saying if somebody's sick and they watch it even though they're sick that's a problem, but I'm saying some people do choose not to go just so they can sit back on their couch and watch it. And I think that's a serious what do you call it?
Breach.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're abusing what that was intended to be. God is intended for Christians to gather together and to worship Him, and there's no substitute for that.
No, and I want to. I don't want to get our show off track, but I'll just say this: that pandemic caught a lot of people off guard, and a lot of people are still studying what people did during that. And so I think there needs to be a lot of allowance for people to study what they did. I'm just telling David where I'm at on that. I look at Epaphroditus, who risked his life in order to be able to serve the Apostle Paul. He risked his life. And am I going to display the same attitude in risking my life in order to serve my brethren in worship? And I think, that's where I'm at. I think I should be willing to do that. And so the next pandemic, when it comes our way, I'm going to be telling the brethren I'm going to be at church ready to worship, and hopefully there'll be some that'll show me. If I get sick and die, I get sick and die, but I'm going to live to serve God. That's where I'm at currently, and of course I allow my brethren time to study that as well, because I may want to change my mind later on that, because I still talk to brethren on this, and I know everybody's still thinking about that pandemic, and their actions, and so I'm not trying to cast stones as far as the pandemic goes, but I'm just telling David that's where I'm at. Now, as far as what Josh was getting at with the, let's see, where are we at now on the, the family discussions? You know, a lot of times, family knows what buttons to push because they know us so well. And a lot of times when families get together, fights take place. And we need to be careful about that because, again, we don't want to be a partaker in those types of things. I mean, if we're going to talk about religion, that's fantastic. But there's a way to talk about religion without fighting. And when people get upset and they start trying to make a fight, then it's time to stop. And there's a way to talk about politics and there's a way to talk about sports. But needless to say, you need to understand. I mean, if those people who know how to push your buttons, you probably know how to push their button too. And so you probably also know these people really well, and you know what discussions you need to stay away from because it's going to cause problems in the family get together. Don't put temptation in front of you. Don't make provision for Satan. Make sure that you're conducting your discussions with your family in such a way as to be reflecting Jesus Christ. Don't put temptation in front of yourself or from in front of other people.
Right. I would say if you know you can't control yourself in some of these discussions, don't take part in them.
Yeah.
I mean, don't forget the Bible has a lot to say about the tongue. Our conversation, Colossians 4 and verse 6, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how to answer each one. If you're going to a family discussion and the last 3 years, it's devolved over whatever. Yeah, and again, just like you said, Richard, you know what buttons. Yeah, you know that there's a good chance that they're going to push a button. Well, you know what? Don't let that button start your engine.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? Give as an example. Since we're dealing with a holiday discussion, give as an example. You're letting them know that you're going to go to church on Sunday. It's Christmas. I'm going to take a couple hours and I'm going to go worship God like I do every week, and so on. And when they bring it up, oh, you're just self-righteous and all these things. You think you're better than us. Don't even respond. From that standpoint, you say, whatever you can say to diffuse the situation. Say, well, this is just my conviction, and I appreciate your attitude. I don't feel that way, but I'm going to go. Just do it. Don't get caught up in the discussion, and especially like you've said, the politics. The politics and sports, those are things you don't argue about. And you know what? As long as you agree with me, there's not a problem, but
I know.
But that's the thing. If they're going to push your button, be prepared and don't let them.
I know for a number of years, the saying's always been the two topics you don't discuss at family gatherings are politics and religion. And I think we've reaped some of the fruit from that, because now we don't know how to have civil discussions about things that are controversial or that are difficult topics. And again, if you can't control yourself in those types of discussions, then don't have them.
Right.
Why would you put yourself in a position where you're just going to get heated and you're going to say things that you shouldn't? I mean, just don't put yourself in that position. But if you can have a civil discussion, then do so. But and I would say, even if you can have a civil discussion, but others can't,
Yeah.
maybe not bring up those issues. And so,
Yeah. That's the point I was thinking of, Josh. It's not just you, but it's the other person.
yeah,
I mean, if you're pushing the button, if by saying something, you're going to push a button, maybe this is not the time to talk about this.
No, usually at those family gatherings, the whole goal should be to get through it.
Yeah, have fun. Yeah, have fun, enjoy family and stuff, and
Catch up.
and think about this too. Why do you want to damage a relationship that you can prevent damaging? That within itself is a thought.
Well, David says, wherever the Apostle Paul went, you either had a revival or a riot. It's a shame we cannot talk about politics or Christianity with people without it being pushed down to let's not rock the boat.
Yep.
And I agree with that. But
we all agree with that.
Yeah. But there's also a time you got to think about that rocking the boat situation. If it's not going to do any good, then your efforts are best elsewhere.
Yeah, and the whole point in that, though, Richard, is a productive conversation always has two sides that are receptive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're not talking about the conversations here. We're talking about people that intentionally know that they're pushing buttons. They don't want to discuss. They want to argue.
But
they want to irritate and they want to grate. And if you've got somebody that's got that disposition, you are casting your pearl before swine. That's not the same thing as engaging in a discussion with somebody.
What did Jesus say about a prophet having honor in his own country? And you got to remember that there has been times I have talked with my family about religious things, and I don't get anywhere. And then I have seen visiting preachers come through and just in a sermon preach the exact same thing that I had said 1,000 times. And all of a sudden they're receptive to it. And of course, when that happens, I always think back to what Jesus said about a prophet not having honors in his own country. It's really difficult for siblings to listen to other siblings. It's family members. It for whatever reason, seems to be a very difficult thing. It's not impossible, but for the most part, it seems to be a very difficult thing. So know your environment, know the people that you're with, and just use some wisdom in that. If you can have a productive discussion on religion, by all means do that. But if that's just not possible, then don't bother.
Sure. Well, we hope this discussion has been beneficial to you. I know there's obviously a lot of challenges that Christians sometimes will face in this season, and hope we can help you to navigate those. As far as my final thoughts, I just think we need to remember that we belong to Christ. That is rooted in our identity. We are identified with Christ. We belong to Him, and our life is reflecting that. And so wherever we are, whether we're traveling, whether we're at a Christmas party, whatever it is we're doing, we need to reflect the fact that we belong to Christ and that we identify as a child of God. Richard, any other final thoughts?
Yeah, it's something and this is just something for people to keep in mind. a lot of families are going to just, I mean, it's very difficult when you have children to tell them we're going to wait till after church to open presents. And so a lot of families are going to open their presents. If they do that, they're going to open their presents before services. And that's fine. But now keep in mind, and this is just something to be considerate of, not everybody at church will be able to or will bless their families with presents in the same way. And children have a tendency to go to church and to tell their friends what they got for presents. And, if someone gets a really nice gift, then that can disappoint another child. Uh, just keep that in mind. And if, you might use that if you got your child a really nice gift. Just tell them, if you go to church, just tell them, hey, I got a lot of things in my stocking. I got candy and things. Just tell them some moderate presents to share. Be careful about causing your fellow friends at church to covet over your presents and make them feel bad about what they might be getting. Which is, I know it's a disappointing thing, but that can happen, and I can remember that taking place when I was a child.
Sure. Dad, any final thoughts?
No, thank you for letting me be on the show.
Thank you,
I didn't
Tom.
want to, but
Just kind of echoing what you were saying there, Joshua. Just remember, whatever you do, wherever you go, people are watching.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
that's just that doesn't stop just because it's a holiday.
sure. Well, thank you for joining in our program this morning. You can reach out to us if you have any questions at bereanspirits@gmail.com. Also in the various Facebook pages that we have on our that we're broadcasting to. You're welcome to reach out to us there. We'd be happy to answer any questions or talk to you about any spiritual concern that you may have. Look forward to seeing you next week. Chris, again, will not be with us next week, but we will have another guest. And so we look forward to seeing you again. And in the meantime, remember to study the scriptures with Berean spirits.
Well, folks, that's all for today. Don't worry. Lord willing, the guys will be back next week for another Bible study on Berean spirits. Until then, let the guys hear from you. Drop them some email at bereanspirits@gmail.com. They'd love to hear from you. Until next time, let's keep studying that Bible.